Hi, welcome to the Cook's Domain. Today I'm going to cook a vegetarian dish. It's called Chana Saag Masala, which basically means chickpea and spinach. And a couple of things about this recipe. Firstly, unlike the chicken tikka masala video, which I did basically for someone who wanted to start from scratch in that one day to complete the entire meal, and this video is going to be more in line with how I would do it ordinarily, which is that the base part of the curry I make in advance. So where in the chicken tikka masala video you saw me make a very small amount of base sauce or base stock to then make the gravy, and that takes a couple of hours to do, where I cut up a whole onion, a little bit of carrot, a little bit of pepper if you saw that video. I put it all together in a pot, and then I cooked it through, made it all soft, and then I blitzed it and I made this kind of currified vegetable stock. The thing is, I don't do that every time I want to make a curry. It takes 4 hours to make a curry that way. What I do is I make a massive pot with the exact same ingredients, just larger quantities, and I make that base, and then I put it into pots, and each pot would do about 2 or 3 portions of curry. I label it curry base, and I put it in the freezer, so that when I want to make a curry one day, instead of it taking me 4 hours, I'll have it done in 30 minutes. And I think that's a far better way to do this. Now, I did have a video ready for the curry base where I made a large pot, obviously made this batch, but somehow we lost some of the footage. So just go to the chicken tikka masala video, see how I made that base, and just double, triple, quadruple those amounts, put in a big pot, puree it down, portion it into pots, and that's it basically. It's pretty much exactly the same. Some very minor differences, but I will have a video for the curry base in the future, and when I do, the link will be coming up right now. But for now, just do that. So once we have that, we want to start to defrost this. We want to get it warm. So what I do is I'll get a saucepan, I'll drop this in, just a little bit of water, and I mean literally like half a cup of water, and then we're just going to let it simmer to the side on one of the smaller eyes on the stove, and just let it melt and heat up and just gently bubbling. And that's all you need to do with that. Okay, let's get on with it. To make Chana Saag Masala, we need 2 ingredients. One is the saag, which is spinach. I use frozen spinach that I buy in bags. It comes in these nice kind of block shapes. Use as much or as little as you like for the recipe, depending on how much you like spinach. For me, the spinach is very important. I love spinach, so I'm using 10 frozen pieces here. You can, of course, use fresh spinach. I have done that. Don't use baby leaf. It's more expensive, and you don't get a lot of spinachy flavor from it, especially once you cook it. It's great in a salad, not great cooked. Some of the supermarkets sell something that they call young tender spinach. That's a lot better. Use that. Or go to the continental stores and get not young spinach, just spinach. It's got a much more aggressive taste, and if you don't like that, then... The other thing we need to talk about is our chana, or chickpeas. There's 2 types. There's this dry form, which I use, and then there's the canned. I'm not going to get into a debate about which is better, because I think it's nonsense. Maybe on the point of view of health, I suppose the dry one is a little better than this canned stuff. But taste-wise, there's not a lot between them. I'd say this is softer. This has probably a better texture if you use these. Here's why I have them. It all depends on what's going on in my life. If I've decided from a day or 2 before, you know what, I want some Chana Saag Masala in a couple of days, then I use the dry one, because it needs 24 hours to soak, or at least 12 anyway. I do it overnight. I pour 100-150 grams of this into a bowl. I will cover it in water. When I say cover, I don't mean just cover. I will fill a bowl up with water, because they will expand and they'll draw in all that moisture. And 12, 14, 16 hours later, you're going to have ready to cook chickpeas. And I like the texture and the flavor of the dry ones a bit better than the canned, but there's not a lot in it, but they are a bit better. But if I just want a Chana Saag Masala today, the dry one's out, obviously. I don't have 12, 14 hours to soak it and get it ready. That's when I use a can. And the canned ones are pretty much cooked. They're ready to go. All you need to do is just rinse it, drain it of this liquid that's in here, rinse it with cold water, put it in a saucepan, put it with some hot water. Don't really let it boil because it could turn it into mush, but really you're just trying to heat it through. So the moment you've heated it through, just stop the cooking process and have it ready for you to put into the curry. Okay, the next ingredients we're going to need to make this. Now, Chana Saag Masala pretty much only has just these ingredients. I like more texture in my Indian food. I've also noticed when I go to the more pricier restaurants, I find that there is depths of flavors that your ordinary local restaurants don't have, and have textures that your ordinary local restaurants and takeaways don't have. Do I know exactly what they put in it? I don't, but I've been experimenting and testing, and there is two that I do quite often in a lot of my curries, and you'll see. So what I have here is about a quarter of a bell pepper, which I've cut extremely finely into tiny, tiny little pieces. And I have half an onion. You can use red or white. Here I'm using a red onion, which again I've also diced into pretty small pieces. And they're going to offer another texture layer on our chana masala, as well as the spinach and the chickpea. The other things we're going to need is 3 cloves of garlic and just about a ½ inch of ginger. So maybe like a finger depth off of this, and I'll peel it. And we're going to turn this into a ginger and garlic paste. So basically you're just going to put all 3 cloves and that little bit of ginger into a blender, a little bit of water to help it blend and create a fluid, a white fluid that we're going to use in the curry. I'm also using 1 green chili, which I'm going to chop up. 1 tablespoon of tomato puree, which I then dilute with water. The amount of water doesn't matter, it's just about being able to pour it into the pan when it comes to pouring, because tomato puree is extremely thick. We also have 1 piece of cinnamon or cassia bark, which I'm using here, 4 cloves, and that's actual cloves, the spice, if you will. I have 2 small bay leaves, but if you have 1 large one, do that. A little piece of Star Anise. You don't have to throw the whole thing in, just break a little piece off of Star Anise. And a couple of Cardamom Pods, which I crack open. Later for garnish, I'm going to have one of these spring onions, or scallions, I think they're called in the US and in Ireland. I'm going to chop one up for garnish. We also need a teaspoon of black mustard seeds and a teaspoon of whole cumin seeds. As always with Indian food, there's a lot going on, but this is a very simple recipe and very easy to put together. Now, the only other spices we're going to use are the following. Our mixed powder that I've shown you how to make, coriander, cumin, Garam Masala, tiny amount of chili powder, and a tiny amount of Hing, also known as, I'm not sure how to pronounce it really. I think in the supermarkets it's labeled as Asafoetida. Now, is it necessary to add this? No. You can make this recipe without this. Has a slight oniony flavor, but what it does do, and why I like to put it in my vegetarian dishes, especially if I've got things like where I've got beans in it or cauliflower in it, which I don't in this case, but especially things like that, is this has something in it which helps reduce bloatiness and gaseousness in those foods. So that's why I like to add it, especially in vegetarian type foods, a lot of chickpea here, etc. But it adds a nice onion kind of a taste to the food as well, so it's nice. But you don't have to have it. As well as the chili powder, you can omit the chili powder from this and you'll still have that Chana Saag Masala flavor. I just like a little spice in mine. It's not going to be a lot, and if you don't want it, don't add it. Now, the only reason why my particular version right now will not be vegetarian, but your version can be, is that I'm going to be using my ghee or clarified butter to cook this. You can use oil. Now, I know there's going to be some vegetarians out there going, no, I use butter. I'm a bit confused as to exactly what these labels mean, and I do apologize for that. But there are vegetarians who do eat, I think, butter and eggs, just won't eat flesh. And then there are vegetarians that won't even have that. And then I know there are vegans, which has nothing to do with anything that's animal related whatsoever. But I'm not sure on these definitions. So all I'm saying is the one I will cook right now will be cooked with ghee. You don't have to do that. Just use oil, like a vegetable oil, and then the entire dish will be completely vegetarian. Or at least also maybe vegan. I'm not sure exactly. I don't think anything here is derived from animals, but I don't know about the processes in the background and whatever. I don't want to make any statement without being sure of it, basically. So yeah. Now I'm going to show you how to put this together. It is not difficult. This will come together so fast. You'll have a beautiful, delicious meal in no time. The only other thing I'm going to put on right now is the rice, because the rice is going to take longer than this. So if you want to know how to make pilau rice, just click the link in the video. Okay, so I've drained a can of chickpeas. I've just added them to some water. Just going to give it a sprinkling of salt. About a teaspoon. Give that a good mix. And it's on a low heat, just to let it come up to temperature, just let it heat up. Okay, so with our pan on a very low heat, we want to put in 3 tablespoons of oil, or as I'm going to add here, 3 tablespoons of ghee. There we go. And to that we want to add our 2 cracked cardamom pods, our bay leaf, our cinnamon piece, a little bit of star anise, and our 4 cloves. Just stir that around a little bit. Now what we're doing here basically is seasoning the oil. A lot of Indians and the Indian restaurants have pre-seasoned oil. So they'll do a huge vat of this and bottle it up and then just pour the oil straight into their pan, and it's already seasoned. But I don't have that. Sometimes I'll make it and I'll have it, but you know, I'll use it up. But you could just do this. Just give that a minute just to release some of those flavors. Okay, once the bay leaves have turned this golden brown color, I know it's ready to take it out. I don't want anything to burn. Now, we are going to cool the pan by adding things to it now. And if you don't mind having these bits in here and then fishing them out while you eat, that's up to you. Personally, I don't like that, so I'm now going to remove these bits and pieces from in here. They've done their job as far as I'm concerned. And I don't want to bite into any of these things when I'm eating. So, okay, so with our heat still on low, we now want to add our black mustard seeds and our teaspoon of cumin seeds. We're not going to leave them in there long, we don't want them to burn. Once you hear that popping sound, it means we're ready to add our next ingredients, which are the dry spices. So it's a tablespoon of our mixed powder, 1/3 of a teaspoon of turmeric, 1/4 teaspoon of chili powder, 1/2 teaspoon of Garam Masala, 1/2 teaspoon of coriander powder, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of Hing or Asafoetida. Mix those in as well. And what we want to do now immediately is add our ginger garlic paste. Mix that in, and then add our tomato puree paste and mix that in as well. To this we now want to add our onions, and our pepper. Mix those in as well. Now the temperature would have been brought right down, so you can now up the heat to just under medium. Give those a chance to sweat down and soften. You can now sprinkle in the half teaspoon of salt and a half teaspoon of pepper. So now we can add our spinach. Okay, so I've just added the spinach and just mixing it in. And we're letting that now cook off and sweat down and let it get dry. Remember, we're on a medium-low heat now, so between low and medium. As you can see, it's now starting to dry up and the oil is separating. So now we want to get a ladle, and we're going to get a ladle of our base, which is sitting and being warm here on the stove, and just pour a ladle of that curry-based sauce into the pan and work it in. And we don't want to do too much, because we don't want to boil anything here. We're not stewing, we're frying. So we want to mix that in. Stops everything burning. And we'll leave it again for it to dry up. Just give it a mix every now and again just to make sure nothing is sticking. Okay, once it starts to get dry again, like it has now, we'll just go back to our curry base that we've got here. Let's pick up a ladle full and pour that straight into the chana. And again, we can see that the oil is starting to separate again. It's getting dry, but everything's starting to soften up nicely. So now we can add 2 ladles of our base. Let's mix that in. Now remember, you want your base to be warm or hot, but don't burn that either. Okay, so because we're getting close, I took my 1 green chili and I halved it, and I halved it again into quarters, and I halved that again into 8ths, and I'm going to sprinkle those in so that they can cook and soften as well. You can do this any which way you like. If you don't like the idea of biting into one of these, just cut it up really small, and you can put it in at the same time as your onions and your peppers if you like. That way they soften and disappear into your chana masala. Personally, I like that little surprise. Here we go. We just want to leave it again to dry up. Okay, now if we were using dried chickpeas that we would have rehydrated overnight and had spent the hour to cook them, I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, to the dried chickpeas the next day when they're all ready to be cooked, just put them on boiling water for about 10 minutes and then simmer them for about an hour. But the longer you simmer them, the softer and more tender they get. Some people don't like it when it's just too soft, so it all depends on what texture you're looking for. But if you are using the dried chickpeas, you can add them to this point of the cooking, because we've still got a little bit to go, and that this will add to just drawing in a little bit of the curry flavor and just overall being absolutely delicious. The canned variety, unfortunately, is pretty cooked and it's pretty tender, pretty soft. And if you add it in too early, you run the risk of it really becoming quite mushy. So I will add it literally at the end of the process. Now, as you can see, this is getting dry again. So we can now add another couple ladles of our base. Mix that in. Now what is happening here basically is that the base has water in it, which helps bring down the pan heat so we're not burning anything. Also helps soften all the vegetables, but also the water will evaporate, leaving behind our uneven fibrous material from the curry base and making a thick sauce for us. But the flavor of the sauce will not be the curry base, it'll be all those spices that we put at the beginning in the frying pan. That is the true flavor profile of this dish. As you can see, it's starting to get dry again. It's producing all these bubbles that are pushing through, and we don't want to burn anything. So again, what we will do now is add the last of our curry base. Barely a ladle in there. So that's all of the pre-made curry base in. And it's at this point we can now drain our chickpeas and add them to the main dish. Okay, so now they're drained, we can add the chickpeas. And we want to mix those in. Okay, one last ingredient we want. So we want a large pinch of Kasuri Methi leaves. And I like to just, with using my fingers just to grind them up even more. And drop those straight into the pan and mix those in. As we can see, it's drying up nicely. And it's at this point, now that we're getting close to the kind of consistency that we want, that we can test for salt and pepper. Okay, I think it needs probably another half teaspoon of salt, a couple of grinds of black pepper, just mix those in. This is very close. Now it's up to you whether you want to stop at this point, whether you want your Chana Masala to be a wet curry or whether you want it quite dry. But it's perfectly acceptable to stop, well, very close to now, not quite yet. There's still, let's say, too much water in it for me. And the oil hasn't as yet separated, but it's close. It's going to happen very soon, minute or two. Okay, as we can see now, we're getting oil separation. All the oil is starting to bubble up on the sides and a little bit in the middle. You're getting a shine and a gloss, and that tells us that our curry is ready. All we have to do now is put it in our serving bowl, garnish it, and serve with some rice. So our Chana Masala is almost ready now. We've put it into our serving bowl. The only other thing we want to do now is dress it with just a little bit of mustard oil. I just like to pour just a tiny amount over the top before I garnish it. The mustard oil just gives it a smell of authenticity and a little bit of a taste, and it's only a little drizzle. And if you want to know more about mustard oil, I've got a video on it, and you can make a decision as to whether you want to use mustard oil or you can just pour any other neutral oil that you have, just a little drizzle over the top like you would in a salad. Next thing all we need to do is add our garnish, which is spring onion in this case, or scallions. And there we have it. One Chana Saag Masala ready. All we've got to do now is serve up our rice, and we've got a lovely curry to serve.